Hi guys, I am Cal, welcome to my channel. This is the first video that I'm creating, but basically what I'm going to do with this channel is dedicate to music, explore some of my favourite artists, their discographies, analyse what's going on in the music world at the moment, music history, and yeah, if that sounds like something that you are interested in and you enjoy this video, then feel free to subscribe, like the video, all that good stuff. So yeah, let's get into the video. So today I'm going to be covering one of my favourite artists of all time, and that is Björk. As you can tell by the t-shirt that I'm wearing and the record that I have on display today, she is an icon, you know, she means an awful lot to me, and I'm sure she probably means something to you if you are here watching this video as well. We're just going to be covering what her beginnings were, how she really made a name for herself, how she found her voice. So let's go back to the only logical place to start, and that is the very beginning. So Björk was born in 1965 in Reykjavik, and she was raised in a commune by her mother and her stepfather. Björk was enrolled in a music school at the age of 6, and this is where she learned how to play classical piano and flute. So even from a really young age, she was already showing signs of being a musical prodigy. In 1976, during a school music recital, Björk performed an adorable rendition of Tina Charles's song, I Love to Love. Take a listen for yourself. I love, but my baby just loves to dance. Yeah. You can't tell me that is not the cutest thing that you have ever heard. Teachers were even so impressed with Björk's performance that they sent it to the one and only radio station that Iceland had at the time, and the recording garnered some attention, specifically though from an Icelandic record label named Falcon. The label offered an 11-year-old Björk a recording contract, and soon after she began recording what would become her first album, technically, but we'll get more into that later. In December 1977, Björk's self-titled record was released. Although it's nothing really that special in the grand scheme of her discography and her artistic vision, it's impressive in itself that Björk managed to sign a contract and record an album at 11. Like, not many people can say that they have been able to do that. The album contained Icelandic covers of popular songs by artists such as the Beatles and Stevie Wonder. Following its release, Björk became something of a national celebrity in Iceland, and Falcon were keen to record a second album with her. However, Björk declined the opportunity, and here's what she said on her decision.
I felt funny about having an album out that said Björk on it, and it wasn't my work. But I sort of promised that to myself that I would never do that again unless I felt it was my album, not just something I fronted.
So instead, Björk used the money that she had raised from her first album so she could buy a piano. This is when she started writing songs of her own, and her creative output really began to flourish. By the late 1970s, punk rock was growing in popularity in the UK and the US. Bands such as The Clash, Sex Pistols and the Buzzcocks were gaining notoriety for their hard-hitting, fast-paced tracks. The punk movement showed resistance to the status quo, with the synthesis of political lyrics and statement-making fashion showing an active aversion to the characteristics of mainstream rock at the time. The punk movement had cemented itself within Icelandic culture by the early 1980s, and it had done it in a big way. During Iceland's transition into punk, Björk was at the forefront of it all. She'd been in punk bands from the age of 12 years old. Some of these bands had interesting names, to say the least. One of my personal favourites is Spit and Snot, but nothing can top Tapi Takaras, which translated into English means Cork the bitch's ass. Yeah, but it was Kukl, a band formed in 1983 that really shook up the trajectory of Björk's career. The band originally formed as a supergroup and then proceeded to release 2 albums until they disbanded in 1986. Following their disbandment, some of the members and a few new faces created a new band, the Sugarcubes. Around this time, Björk also gave birth to her first son, Sindri, his father being the guitarist of the Sugarcubes, Thor Eldon. They had a short-lived marriage, but the band stayed intact, and following this they even grew in popularity. It was the release of their 1987 debut single, Birthday, that really catapulted the band into the public eye. The single garnered attention overseas, and this marked the first time that the world got to hear Björk's incomparable vocal talent. The Sugarcubes' debut album, Life's Too Good, was released in April 1988. It received critical acclaim, and over the years the album has been praised as a highly influential album for the development of Icelandic alternative music. It could be said that this album truly stamped Iceland on the map as a musical force to be reckoned with. The band went on to release 2 more albums, Here Today, Tomorrow Next Week in 1989 and Stick Around for Joy in 1992. Despite gaining moderate commercial success over the years, the band parted after their 3rd album, with Björk determined to explore new sounds and pursue a solo career. And if you didn't already know, this was just the beginning for Björk. "1993 was a monumental year for Björk. She moved to London with her son, and her sights were set on finding a new sound as a solo artist. The basis of her official debut album was rooted in melodies and lyrics that she had written many years prior to moving to London, some dating back as early as her childhood. The next step in constructing her first album was finding a sonic palette. This is what Björk had to say on finding her musical footing in a new home of London. The people I was most attracted to, and the scene I was most attracted to when I came here, were people who knew as little as I did about what was going to happen. Not people who had already established things, but people who were still trying to enter the unknown and trying to discover something that had never been discovered before. And London was an exciting place to be in the early 1990s. Underground club scenes were flourishing, musical boundaries were being pushed, and the city was a melting pot of cultural diversity. Subsequently, London had a huge influence on shaping the sound and the feel of what would become Debut. While also striving to create something new, around this time, Björk started to recognise her own musical influences. Most notably British artists such as Kate Bush and Brian Eno, among many others. Björk started working alongside Nelly Hooper, a Bristolian producer who had worked for U2 and Soul to Soul, but was also known for his contribution to the growing trip-hop scene that was quickly taking the UK underground by storm. Hooper and Björk found that their sonic visions were compatible, and thus they started to work together on 10 out of 11 tracks for Debut. In terms of style, Debut shaped into a wildly eclectic album. Its sonic influences varied from jazz to world music, but at its core it was rooted in electronic, most notably dance and house. The opening track of the album, Human Behaviour, is a perfect example of dance music with an eclectic Björk spin. The song is underpinned by driving beats that clatter along and bounce across one another, but they are all tied together with timpani drums and a sampled guitar riff. Lyrically, the track takes the perspective of an animal trying to understand the complexity of humans.
There's definitely no logic to human behavior.
And it was inspired by one of Björk's biggest role models, David Attenborough. Human Behaviour is a playful intro, and its sonic exploration set the tone for what is to come for the rest of the album. Another highlight from Debut is its third track, Venus as a Boy. track is a tender yet light-hearted ode to sensuality, with the melting pot of instrumentation creating an ethereal and dreamy soundscape to get lost in. World music influences sprawl across Venus as a Boy. The song's trip-hop inspired bass line is replicated by tablas, which are a type of hand drum that originate from India. As well as this, a Bollywood string section can be heard throughout the track. One of my personal favourite elements of the song is the gibberish verses that Björk sings, which kind of became something of a Björk staple in songs that would follow in her later releases. In this instance, however, the indistinct lyrical passages just emphasise this sense of complete rapture. She relies on her expressive vocal abilities to portray a very specific tone, something that only a few artists can do, and Björk is absolutely one of them. Big Time Sensuality is another debut track that touches on themes of euphoria and bliss. However, instead of honing in on romantic and sexual themes, this song was specifically dedicated to Nelly Hooper as a tribute to his influence as a collaborator. This song includes my favourite lyric of the whole album, and I think it perfectly sums up the creative process that went behind Debut and this whole mindset of Björk going into the unknown. Despite the recording of Debut being a time of creative liberation and exploration, it was also a time of adjusting to new surroundings and reflecting on the life in Iceland that she had left behind. This is highlighted on the second track, Crying. It's a deep house track built on synths and a wonky piano melody, but the lyrics detail Björk's loneliness. Similarly, Aeroplane extends upon those themes as Björk yearns for a lover who is living across seas. Come to Me spin these themes on their head as Björk becomes this omnipresent force of emotional support for her lover. The lyrics detail a deep sense of compassion, matched with her beguiling vocal performance and hazy trip-hop beats, making this track feel like a long, warm embrace to heal all wounds. Björk returns to introspection on the album's closing track, The Anchor Song. It is the only track on the album that Björk produced solely on her own, and I really do believe that this song means a lot to Björk, and it's probably the only logical bookend to an album that means so much to her as a debut, as her first foray into this musical world that she was just discovering. No beats, no eccentricities, just raw vocal and saxophone. After exploring an array of influences across Debut, Björk goes back to her roots with a starker approach, dedicating this final track as a love letter to her home country of Iceland.
And drove my anchor. This is where I'm staying. This is my home.
So there we have it, a whistle-stop tour of how Björk became the artist that we know today, how she planted herself on the map and became a cultural phenomenon following the release of her debut album in 1993. And although her 1977 album was technically a debut, in the grand scheme of Björk's discography now, in the present day, it's really quite insignificant in terms of her creative output and how she developed as an artistic mind. Even if Björk didn't believe this 1977 release to be a true representation of her artistic vision, it almost acted as a driving force to only create music that was authentic to herself. And thus was born an artist of experimentation and innovation, whether it be fronting low-profile bands in Iceland during the punk movement, or blurring the lines between genre as she did on her debut, 1993 debut that is. Björk quickly cemented herself as a musical pioneer. And that is how Björk found her voice. So, I hope you enjoyed that video. I know I enjoyed creating it. It's been in the works for quite a while now, but if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoy this type of content and you want to see more from me and what I have to say about music and stuff, then please subscribe, give this video a like, let me know how you found it. But that's it from me. So yeah, I'll see you guys later. And stream some Björk. Do yourself a favour. She's the best, okay?